how did we end up here again in a Westminster Hall debate or in the chamber full of warm words calling for action, hearing from the Union of Jewish Students that they've reported a shocking 400% increase in anti-Semitism incidents on campuses following the 7th of October attacks. We hear the rise of anti-Semitism in our universities, on the streets that our British Jewish students are experiencing on a daily basis, and we seem unable to tackle the issue. And half of the Jewish students have heard chants glorifying Hamas and Hezbollah, protests disturbing learning for 65% of the students. And the stories of Jewish students and staff members that they share are harrowing. Physical attacks, anti-Semitism normalized in lecture theaters, protests outside exam rooms. And although many would like to blame this on the current state of geopolitical affairs, it is very difficult to do so when one needs to only look back into history in the interwar period. And I don't want to drag in my educational background, but the interwar period plays a very vital role in why we need to clamp down on anti-Semitism today. In the interwar period, there was no Israel. There was just the rise of anti-Semitism. We had the same kind of economic situation that we have today. We had people looking for someone to blame. And we saw on university campuses week after week after week the rise of many different movements, but the rise of protests on university campuses. And at this point in Germany, there was a very large Jewish population that was fully integrated. They were German of the Messianic faith. They fought in World War II. They received the German Cross for bravery. They did everything. They were German of the Messianic faith. The protests began, the anti-Semitism rose on university campuses. That was where it rose first. And the Jewish students assumed they could argue, they could debate, they could find a logical way through this situation that would allow for common sense and reason and decency to prevail. And they believed that. They had been German in the modern era of modernity, through the Romantic period. They believed that they were now German and that they, through rational argument and debate, could quell the anti-Semitism on university campuses. Well, that was not the case, Mr. Chairman. As the protests grew for weeks and weeks and months, finally violence erupted in those protests and Jewish students were killed. And then you saw the protests erupt throughout Germany. You saw the Night of the Broken Glass. You saw all of these things. And it was a 10-year process that brought that rise of anti-Semitism, the first ghettoization of German Jews. And it wasn't a quick process. It was a slow, incremental process that started on university campuses. And the reason I am so adamant that we stop the rise of anti-Semitism here is this is where universities are training future leaders. This is where the next generation of British men and women who will go on to lead in parliament, in business, in commerce for the United Kingdom, a country that has always exhibited fair play and decency to the rest of the world. When the rest of the world has lost their minds, it is often the United Kingdom that has held decency and morality at the heart of their judgment. And I do not want to see our country go down the way of the rise of nationalism, much like they did in Germany, much like they did in even the US in the interwar period. And stopping anti-Semitism at the university level is so vital to protect the next generation, from making the mistakes that others have made in generations past. And it isn't an issue of, oh, well, we should probably just be a little bit more fair-minded. No, every student deserves equality of access to education. Every student deserves to go to university and feel safe in their exams and feel safe when they walk through and shouldn't be harassed or bullied or shouted at or or attacked because they have a Star of David or they have any kind of religious symbol. For any ethnic minority, I would be saying this. And Mr. Chairman, the reason I know about the interwar period and the rise of anti-Semitism is because I worked in Kosovo with Muslim Albanians who were attacked, and I wanted to study the rise of nationalism and how that affected other European countries, because it hasn't been in such recent times that we've had a similar thing happen in Europe, in the Balkans, and it was a 10-year slow creep of people deciding that their neighbors that they'd lived with for centuries were perfectly fine with, and then all of a sudden they developed hatred and division. And what I do not want to see in our society, which I have come to as an immigrant and was welcomed, and I love this country, is for us to lose the fabric of what makes our society great, which is tolerance and inclusivity, and to exclude and to treat British Jewish students with this level of hatred for a country that many of them have no connection to and have never been to, and most of them, by the way, before this ever came into the sort of, forefront, most of the Jewish community that I spoke to in London had very few views about Israel, wasn't involved, didn't care, and it didn't concern them in any way. But they are being drug into this. They are being treated with racism and hatred for something that does not involve them. They are British citizens, they are part of British culture, and they are being treated with hatred and disrespect simply because of a war that's happening in the Middle East. And I would ask that politicians look at the gravity of this situation and take seriously the recommendations of the Jewish university students that they've brought several very good proposals, and I think one of the clear recommendations, there were 6 recommendations that I think we should be accepting, and will the government insist that universities adopt the Union of Jewish Students Best Practice Guidance, which sets out practical recommendations for universities to tackle anti-Semitism. I do hope that the government will strongly take into consideration these recommendations and actually use them, because they're coming from the students, by the students, and it's a very good solution. And if we fail to act now, we fail the thousands of British Jews. We will set our country on a course to a future where anti-Semitism is not just normalized, it is the norm. We will make our universities seats of hatred, not seats of learning. I hope today we will come together in this debate and send a clear message to Jewish students and staff. We are with you, and we see you, and we will take the action that is needed. Thank you.